This happened about 7 years ago when I was 16, and I'd all but forgotten about it until a few weeks back when my mom brought it up. Necessary backstory. I grew up in a rural town in Australia. My house was 30 minutes out of town, with 20 acres of thick bushland behind it, and a driveway that was about a 5-minute drive on its own. The neighbor's house shared the driveway, but was surrounded by 5 acres itself, so we were incredibly isolated. It always felt like a really safe place because it was so far away from other humans, and that comes with its own perks and downsides. One of the perks, no one can hear you scream when you're having a good time, a party, or a get-together. But the downside is the other side of that coin. No one can hear you scream. In 2012, my brother graduated high school and my folks got sick of being so far out. They decided to rent the house out and move closer to town. But by then, my mom was so used to not having neighbors that having people right next door annoyed the shit out of her. We once heard a neighbor sneezing, and that was the last straw for her. So a year later, at the end of our lease, we moved back to our house, but this time without my brother, who was in college by that time. When we went back, we moved into our original rooms, put all the original furniture back how it was more or less. My room was the only one on the left side of the house. I chose it for the view of the shed, which used to have our chickens, ducks, and alpacas roaming around it. But the room felt different somehow, like it wasn't mine any longer. Instead of swapping rooms and having to do all my posters and stuff again, I just started sleeping with my light on. The only other thing that was different was that the renters had left a horse float and a caravan in the paddock next to the shed. I couldn't have cared less, honestly, but my mom was calling the renters every other week to get them to come move them, ASAP. Also, at this time, my dad was working with a mining company and installing a pipeline to an island off the East Coast, so he was away for about a month at a time, then back home for 2 weeks, and the cycle would repeat. So, on to the point. One night when my dad was away at work, and it was just my mom and myself at home, I was exhausted and went to bed really early. Ended up having the absolute worst dream of my life. I was a little shit at this time, being a 16-year-old girl and being rattled by my nightmare. I barely spoke for the next few days. It really did shake me to my core. The dream in question started off with my dog barking, as she would for the entire 5 minutes anyone was coming down the driveway. I went out to get her, but it was pitch black. I could only just see her standing at the edge of the grass by the drive, and she was standing really aggressively, in a way that I only ever saw her do to kangaroos or the neighbor's dog. I started hearing footsteps crunching on the pebbles, then guys' voices coming from either side of the house. The dog was now running from left to right, going absolutely apeshit and getting gradually closer to me, as if the voices were closing in, and she was trying her hardest to protect me. I was trying to scream, but the only sound I could make was that of labored breath, and I was absolutely paralyzed with fear. I couldn't make out what the voices were saying, but they were laughing to each other and whispering. This kept going on for what felt like an eternity, the mysterious male voices getting closer and closer, but never emerging from the shadows enough for me to know who they were. Eventually, I woke up. It wasn't like a movie where I jumped up and was out of breath. I was lying in bed like a dead pharaoh, and my eyes opened like I had never been asleep, just that I had taken one long blink. After a few days of acting strange, my mom finally asked what was up. She's not the most talkative person herself, so she asked it offhandedly and wasn't looking directly at me as I went to respond. As I told her about my dream, she stopped what she was doing and looked at me as if I'd just spoken in tongues. Turns out, the night that I had that dream, shortly after I went to bed, but just before sunset, 2 guys rocked up to the house saying they were there to collect the horse float. Our dog went bananas at them, which was only strange because normally, as soon as you were close to her, she'd fall on the ground and demand belly scratches. Mom didn't recognize these guys as anyone in the group/family that rented from us, but they knew about the shit and Mom wanted it gone, so she put the dog in her lockup and took the two guys out to it. One of them took it upon himself to take a walk around the back of the house, parallel to the shed behind the dog lockup, then came back and pointed out that there was only one car in the driveway. But before, he had noticed that there was a van. Whose van was it? He even said something like, "Husband not home tonight?" while looking at my window, the one with the light coming through the curtains. To say the least, my mom was freaked out. How did this guy know how many cars we had when she's never met either of them before? In an instant, she thought they must have come around before, seen two cars, and gone on their way. Following the man's gaze to my room, she let out a relaxed laugh and said Dad was in there cleaning his guns, but he's probably done now, and she'll go get him so he can help with the float. Now, the most intense weapon my dad has ever owned is a rusty machete, so I have no idea where that came from on my mom's end, but I'm eternally glad for it. They protested and said that they could manage it on their own, but she bolted inside anyway, locked all the doors, then stood by the front window with a knife, just to make sure that they left in an orderly fashion. Funny enough, they ended up driving off without the horse float. When Dad got home about a week later, he called the renters up in a fit of rage, just to find out that they hadn't sent anyone to go get the float for them. But all their friends knew it was there because they'd been trying to organize help to get both in one day. Purely because I was sleeping with the light on at the time it happened, and because I went to bed early that night, my mom and I escaped a potentially seriously horrific situation. Because part of me feels like that if my 16-year-old naive self was out there with my mom, I would have been the first to declare that it was just us home alone that night. Before I go into my story, I just want to explain that in the lead up to this particular incident, I had a number of strange attempted break-ins and occurrences around my house. So much so that I had to install cameras with motion sensors on every entry and exit in my apartment, just so I could make sure that no one was there when I got in at night. One of the first occurrences was encountering a man standing in my room when I walked in during broad daylight. I had stuff go missing the week before, and my roommate said he had the sense that he was being watched while at home that week. On to the story though. So I'm on my way home from a night out, and I start going through my phone. I see that I have a message on Tinder, and check it out. The girl who messaged me looks attractive, but I instantly think catfish because she sounds so eager to meet me, and I know that when something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. I get home, and she sends me her address. I check it, and it's no more than a 5-minute walk away. I'm a little drunk this particular evening, and it sounds appealing, even just the attention. But again, I don't quite believe her. So I ask her to video call me. She surprisingly agrees. I see the call incoming, and I'm not sure what to expect. But surprisingly, it's her. She seems nice. She says she's a little tipsy herself and wants to have some company. So I agree. Now, I'm pretty excited. Maybe I'll actually really hit it off with her, and she lives just a stone's throw away. So I have myself a shower, grab some liquor, and head on over. Now, I'm on the way and walking. As I'm nearing her place, I look across the street and through this archway that leads into the courtyard of another apartment block, I happen to see a man glance out at me, then pretend to look down at his phone. I walk past and I don't know why, but I'm sure it has something to do with the paranoia I'd been experiencing. I stop and decide to walk back. As I come to the archway again, I see the guy's head peek out around the corner, and upon making eye contact, he jumps back rapidly. When I'm in full view of this arched tunnel again, the man is seemingly immersed in his phone once more, and then he starts walking around the corner and down the street. I stand there and look to see if he's going to look back. He doesn't, and that's when I hear a girl's voice behind me. It's the girl from the app, and she's like, "Hey, come on in." It feels like an episode of To Catch a Predator, but she's very clearly in her early 30s, so I begin to relax, but only briefly. We walk up a flight of steps to get to her apartment, but then she starts veering down a flight of steps and tells me she has the basement apartment. I follow her, find myself calm, until I get into the living room. I don't know just how to describe why. There was nothing there to make me feel nervous. But that was exactly it. It was so bare. Just a sofa and this small kitchen table. Pretty much the complete opposite of what I had imagined. I've dated girls, and this just wasn't a girl's apartment. I don't know if that makes sense or not. So now she's like, "Come into my room." And this is when I get this overwhelming sense of fear. Like something inside me is yelling out to me that it's a trap. Don't do it. You're walking into a honey trap. But I try to tell myself that I'm being paranoid and do my best to relax again. So I follow her to her room, and it's this tiny box of a room. There's a bed and an empty bedside drawer, but little else. The thing that weirds me out the most is that there's another door, which I can only assume leads to a bathroom. The door is closed, but there's a very obvious pool of water coming out from underneath the door, as if something had overflowed, but stopped. I'm about to ask her about it, but I don't get the words out, as her hand cups and squeezes my crotch area. I'm taken aback at how forward she starts to become. She kisses me while guiding my hand down the front of her sweats, and whispers for me to take my clothes off. I start to open my shirt, and before I can even do that, she's pretty much butt naked. She sits on the bed and starts doing her best to get my pants down. But this is when that paranoia strikes out to me again for two reasons. One, her over-eagerness to get me naked, and two, the overwhelming feeling that she was trying to distract me or put me in an otherwise vulnerable position. Now, she starts to lie back and pull me on top of her, kissing me and making these over-the-top cinematic moaning noises. That's when I distinctly hear something outside the door, in the living room. I don't know for certain, but if I had to guess, it was the sound of like clothes rubbing against clothes when you're moving in a really quiet place, coupled with soft footsteps. Not many, but as if someone is doing their best to sneak around. As we're kissing, she tells me my watch is catching her skin, asking if I could take it off. I find this request strange, but it gives me a chance to gather myself. I sit up and start to take it off. I ask her why there's water leaking out of the restroom. I don't know genuinely if she misheard me or was completely sidestepping my question, but she simply answers, "Yeah, I've got water right here," and grabs a bottle of water from the side of the bed. I don't re-ask the question. I open the bottle up and take a sip. I hear that same clothes-on-clothes light footsteps movement again. I can feel there is someone right outside the door, and that's when my heart starts to beat through my chest. I can also feel my lips starting to burn, inexplicably. I think she can feel my uneasiness, and she starts to kiss the back of my neck, whispering for me to take her then. Now, I can't tell you how much I wanted this all to be real and not a setup, to believe this girl really wanted me, but even if she actually did like me, she was just way too eager. I say aloud, "What time is it?" and grab my phone. I look at the message where she told me her address, and I memorize it. I open it and go to WhatsApp. I pretend to send an audio message. "Hey guys, I'm at 123 Street in the basement apartment." As these words leave my lips, I can see the wide-eyed surprised look on her face. "I need one of you to come pick me up outside right away. I can't explain it right now, but if you can't come, please send someone to that apartment. If I'm not outside, then I'm in trouble, and call the cops." She pauses, stuck for words, and then asks why I'm so paranoid. I ask her who's outside, and she doesn't even bother to deny that anyone is there. She says, her friend, with no further explanation. That's when I start to get redressed. I feel a sense of relief, but also think maybe I'm overthinking this. I say bye, and she says, "See you later," before she begins texting on her phone. I open the door and notice that the living room is much darker than when we originally walked through it, but I can make out the silhouette of mostly everything there. I don't see any other adjoining room or the silhouette of a person. So now I wonder where the her friend is, or if I was imagining the sounds in the first place. I have the jitters making my way to the exit. It's only a short trip, but I'm envisioning someone jumping out from nowhere and bludgeoning me with something. I get to the stairs, I go up, rush to the door, but I can't figure out how to open it. I can feel someone coming up behind me, up the stairs. My adrenaline has kicked in 100 times. But it's her. She nudges past me, opens it. I say thank you, and I leave. I check my cameras before heading back to my apartment. No one has triggered them. Once I get home, I sit in the kitchen and wonder if I was being crazy. I go to my room and hop into bed when, surprisingly, I get a call from her again. And she's being really cool. She tells me to stop being paranoid and to come back. At this point, I'm actually half thinking about it, thinking that I've been acting insane. But something clicks. A theory I'd been having that would make sense of all of this. I tell her that I can't. She asks why, and I tell her that my roommate is on the phone to the cops, and for her to stay the fuck away from me. I've got cameras everywhere. She audibly pauses, and then says something that still gives me the creeps. I know your roommate isn't home from work yet. And then hangs up. So the weeks before this, as I had explained, I had a few attempted break-ins. I had always thought the roof, because I'm in one of the units on the top floor. But our cameras never caught anything. What I didn't understand was whoever it was, how are they getting in? The apartment next door to me, the only other one on that floor, was occupied by the landlord's brother. He has what I'm guessing is dementia or something similar. He kind of hoards and takes random things in and out every so often. I hadn't seen him in a while, but had heard movement in his apartment pretty regularly. It's then that I knew what was happening. People were coming down the fire escape and in through his window. I think potentially staying there, definitely stealing from him. I think that night they decided to rob me knowing my roommate wouldn't be home until 4 at least, and had someone watching me while I was out in the neighborhood. Once they realized that I was going home early, they tried to distract me. I told the landlord that I thought people were going through the apartment. I don't know what the clutter in there, if you could tell, but if that window had been left unlocked, it would have made an easy point of entry. There hasn't been much activity next door since, so I hope that this is the end of it. I never called the police because I wasn't sure if I was being crazy, but I knew deep down that I wasn't. However, when I tell other people about this story, I can see that they're not so sure. To give a little information about myself, I'm a 25-year-old guy. I started a job at a company that makes lenses for glasses, and immediately I was introduced to Nate, a coworker of mine who happens to be an awkward guy right around my age that seemed as if he had good intentions. He was nice enough, but I figured that most people humored him when it came to talking to him. I was convinced that he was on the spectrum, in the realm of Asperger's. I've had friends in the past who have had this diagnosis, and I really didn't mind spending time with them. Besides, we seemed to like the same things, Nate and I, including Dungeons and Dragons. My D&D group was small, and we wanted more people, and knowing that he was into it, I invited him to come join. My now wife, then fiancé, immediately grew uncomfortable at his presence when he came into our home to make his character, and when it came to actually playing sessions, there was another young woman at our table who also expressed that same uncomfortability. I didn't feel great about exposing them to a situation they weren't comfortable in, so after 3 or 4 sessions, we kicked him out of the group and continued playing together. But I still had to see him at work, which led to him always acting sad around me. But I wasn't going to give in. Eventually, I did my best at keeping him at arm's length by telling him that I was starting another group and that he could feel free to join that one. Although his pity party was starting to annoy me, so I said whatever just to keep him at bay. One day at work, I believe it was a Friday, he had the day off, so we were all happy when Nate wasn't there. But following the weekend, that Monday, Nate was absent once more. Tuesday, again a no-show. This was very unlike him, because whatever the comp is to being a teacher's pet at school, he was that at work. But soon, one of my coworkers was moving around the warehouse, phone in hand, stopping people and sharing the news. Nate had been arrested in North Dakota as he attempted to meet an underage girl for sex. Literally all of us employees were in disbelief, because that's the first feeling that hits you. You don't want to believe somebody like that could live in your town, lest work right beside you. But indeed, there it was. He was in contact with a minor over the internet and set up a meeting at a local park with the intention of having sex. The police were tipped off after a teacher just happened to see the messages on the girl's phone. I nearly hurled when I heard the news. That man was in my home and made comments about my kids being so cute, especially my 10-year-old daughter, which the thought of made me even more sick. He would talk to me sometimes about wanting a girlfriend and how he was just waiting for the right one to come along, often saying that he had his eye on someone in his church group. But now it scares me to think who he actually had his eye on. One of my friends at work mentioned how he went to install a washer and dryer at Nate's house previously, and when looking around, he was yelled at by Nate to not go upstairs. Not in a, "Oh, that's my room, and I'd prefer no one go up there" type of vibe. More like, "There's something up there that I don't want you to see" type of vibe. Nate was arrested, tried, and put in prison. To my knowledge, he remains there to this day, as far as I'm concerned. Just goes to show you that you can't really know everybody. And that is something that is truly terrifying.